In this video, I really want to talk simply about when I think that you should peg a weight on your Texas rig and when you shouldn't peg your weight on a Texas rig. I know that this is something that I've talked about over the years a lot, but it's still one of the top questions that I will get asked in the comments when it comes to any type of like Texas rig type video that I do. So in this video, I'm simply going to talk about when to peg, when to not peg. Now, before we get into the video, this one's brought to you by my apparel company, Finn Fishing. Guys, we are in this stretch between Black Friday and Cyber Monday of 2024. I am running a ton of sales right now over at the Finn Fishing website, including 20% off almost everything at Finn Fishing, 30% off a few items. Also, every single person who buys something, no matter what it is going to receive a free lure. I have this massive box that has a ton of different baits in it that I'm just going to be placing in every single order. Also, anyone who buys something between now and the end of Cyber Monday is going to be put into kind of a drawing to win this rod right here. This is an ARC Cobb Series Little Skipper rod. It's a 6 foot, 10 inch, medium heavy rod. It's made to skip jigs underneath docks, but I've used this thing for jig fishing, for Texas rig fishing, like we're going to talk about, spinner baits, buzz baits. It's a very versatile rod. So I will not request any information from you guys. It's simply just going to show up at your door. You may buy a pair of sun gloves, a sun shirt, whatever, and this might show up with it. So anyways, I'm going to leave some links down below in the description. Shopping at Finn Fishing, surely the best way to help support this channel, and right now is a great time to purchase. All right, let's talk about pegging your weight. Now, to me, over the years, when I first got into bass fishing, I almost always pegged my weight. And if you don't know what I am referring to when I say pegging my weight, this simply means using a bobber stop is typically what I do now in front of your weight so that it does not separate from your bait when you are fishing a Texas rig. Now, back in the day before people started using bobber stops, you know, they had toothpicks that people would use. I have still even used toothpicks before when I've run out of bobber stops. They also have other like rubber pegging. I can't even think of it, but it's like a rubber toothpick basically that you thread into the weight, kind of pull through the weight. But all you're really trying to do here is prevent the weight from separating from your bait. Now, what I have realized over the years after kind of starting, like I said, when I first got into bass fishing, I pegged 100% of the time. I always pegged my weight. But what I have started to realize is that any situation where I can not peg the weight, I truly believe that you get more bites. And this is something that I wholeheartedly believe. It's something that I remember reading a couple of times growing up. Like I remember Denny Brower, reading an article that Denny Brower talked about this. I also remember Ish Monroe talking about this. And those are two guys that are like, they are flippers and pitchers. These are guys that are good with a Texas rig and good with a jig. And I remember reading and listening to them basically say the exact same thing. If you don't have to peg your weight, then don't do it. And I truly believe that that will get you more bites, especially when you are fishing in highly pressured situations. You know, we talk about high pressure all the time because I know here in Ohio we deal with it a lot, but I mean anywhere you go in the country these days, if it's a good lake, there tends to be a lot of pressure there. And so basically what happens though when you don't peg a weight is that weight will separate. Like if you bring it over a limb or you kind of hop it, the weight will separate a little bit away from the bait, and it just kind of causes that bait to have a little bit more of a natural action, sometimes a little bit slower fall as well. And that can really help you to get a lot more bites. What I've also found is that not pegging your weight actually sometimes can allow you to be a little bit more efficient by using a little bit heavier weight. So in a lot of situations back in the day where I used to peg a 1/4 ounce weight to my, plastic, whatever it may be, and maybe fish it against the bank, now I can actually fish a 3/8 ounce weight, but not peg it. So basically I am using a heavier weight, which allows me to make like quicker pitches. Like it's a heavier bait, so I feel like I can reel it in, make a very quick pitch. It gets to the water quicker than like a 1/4 ounce, which kind of has more of a lob when you do that, when you pitch it. And it allows you to just be more efficient. I think that you can hit more places throughout a day using a little bit heavier weight, but an unpegged weight. So any chance that I can get with not pegging my bait, I have found that that is the best option. Now, there are a lot of situations where pegging your weight is like required, or you need to do it. And I want to talk about a few of those. So for one of the biggest places that I'm going to peg a weight a lot is around vegetation. Now this doesn't always apply. Sometimes if you are fishing kind of outside grass lines, you can get away with not pegging that bait. Like if you're casting your bait into the grass and kind of working the edge of the grass, you can get away with not always pegging your weight. But a lot of times if I am fishing some sort of vegetation, I am going to peg it. I am going to do that, because the big thing that you don't want to happen is that you don't want your bait to get hung up in the grass and your weight to fall away from your bait. And then if you get a bite, sometimes what can happen is you can actually create a lot of slack in your line. So for example, say you're fishing, you know, some outside weed clumps or grass clumps or whatever, and maybe they're 7 and 8 foot tall. Like if your bait gets caught up in the top of that grass and your weight falls down, you may think that your bait is on the bottom, but in reality, it is up here really high in the water column. Now, maybe there's a bass that sees that bait, it bites that bait, and then when you go to set the hook, you have this humongous slack, like big bow in your line, where you have created slack. So you set the hook and you don't get a really good hook set in that fish. And so you can lose a lot of fish. So that's why it's important to peg a weight. Another time that I'm going to peg is when I'm fishing in really sticky brush piles or laydowns. And what I mean by sticky is like, if you're fishing around a lot of wood that is like thicker, I'm talking 3 inches, 2-3 inches in diameter and bigger, you don't really need to peg a weight in that situation, because your bait is going to stay fairly close to the weight. But when you're fishing in brush or for example, like buckbrush, if you guys have ever fished buckbrush, these are like little willow bushes that grow half in the water, half out of the water. Those are situations where I do like to peg the weight, because it is so sticky. You have a lot of those, like a lot of the brush, a lot of the actual pieces of wood are like less than 2 inches in diameter. Some of them are like twigs. Those twigs and those little small branches will do the exact same thing that I just talked about with the grass, where they will catch your bait and your weight will fall away from your bait, where then it creates this big separation, which is not what you want. Another place that I like to peg my weight at times is if you fish on a lot of ponds, you will have kind of this slimy stuff or whatnot that will grow on the bottom, and it just seems like a pegged weight. As a matter of fact, if you can find what they call the old school Florida weights, which are the screw-in weights, the weights that have the little screw on the end of them where you actually screw them into the plastic, those are the very best that I love to fish in a lot of ponds that kind of had that slime. Like they come through that stuff without getting a lot of stuff like crap just hung up on it, and that's a really good weight. I don't even know. I remember they call that a Florida rig. At least I remember that they call it a Florida rig. I haven't used those type of weights in a long time, but I remember how effective they were, especially when I did a lot of pond fishing back in the day when I was using, Texas rig worms. They just come through everything super nice without getting hung up. So I think for the most part, those are the situations where I like to peg a weight, and those are the situations where I don't like to peg a weight. Now, one other thing that I want to talk about is actually putting 2 bobber stoppers on your Texas rig. There is a situation where I'm actually going to put 2 on there. This is something that, like I said, I always like to give credit where credit's due. This is something that I learned from Mikey Balls, another YouTuber that I love and enjoy to watch. He fished in Florida, like he lived in Florida for a number of years, where he was flipping and pitching a big weight into matted vegetation a lot. And now he lives closer to Lake Guntersville, where he does a lot of the same thing. Now, having 2 pegs, having two like bobber stoppers in front of your weight, what it really does is that if you are doing a lot of heavyweight flipping and pitching, where you're taking a 1 ounce weight plus, if you have one bobber stopper on there, what tends to happen is over the course of the day of you pitching and flipping and setting the hook, that big weight has enough mass, enough weight that it's going to move that bobber stopper up the line from time to time. This doesn't tend to happen as much when you're using a lighter weight. And because you are using braided line, the more that that bobber stopper goes up and down your line, you will literally burn a hole into that bobber stopper. And so it will eventually just come off. Like you will find over the course of a day that you look down at your weight and the weight is like half off. Like I've seen it a lot over the years. And all you really have to do, instead of putting one bobber stopper on there, put two bobber stoppers on there. One, that really prevents the weight from moving as much, so you're not going to even burn off a lot of those bobber stoppers. And the second thing is, if you happen to burn off one of them, you still got another one there. And so it really helps you to be able to fish really a full day without having to re-rig up your Texas rig, your heavyweight punching setup. And so anyways, that is a place where I'm gonna have actually two bobber stoppers. All right, guys, hope you enjoyed this video all about pegging weight. I hope I covered everything. If you do have any questions, let me know down below in the comments. Also, don't forget to check out that fin gear, and I will see you guys tomorrow.